If you fold an ordinary sheet of paper in half 45 times, it reaches the moon. Most people know that old thought experiment. It sounds like a party trick, but the geometric progression behind it is completely mathematically sound. What nobody ever talks about is fold number 14. At 14 folds, after you've strained your fingers, creased the thick seams, and put every ounce of effort into keeping it neat, the paper isn't floating somewhere above the troposphere, it's barely 4 feet off the carpet. It isn't even tall enough to clear an ordinary kitchen table. If you stopped right there, looked down at that bruised block of pulp, and looked up at the night sky, you'd be convinced the entire equation was a scam. That 4-foot mark is where millions of people quietly lose their financial future. They don't go broke from catastrophic market crashes. They don't lose their shirts to boiler room stock scams or offshore crypto schemes. They spend 10 full years making choices that feel cautious, mature, and completely sensible, only to wake up a decade later with almost nothing to show for their prime working years. The clock starts ticking the very morning you decide to take control of your financial life. You open an account. You sit at a desk under a desk lamp, staring at the flashing numbers, the ticker symbols, and the red percentage drops. You open a few tabs, and every financial news outlet is screaming about an impending recession, a real estate bubble, a sovereign debt crisis, or an upcoming election. Your nervous system reacts the way human biology has evolved to react for hundreds of thousands of years when faced with a rustle in the tall grass. It tells you to freeze. You tell yourself you'll transfer the funds next month. You want to see how the next earnings season shakes out. You tell your partner you just want to wait until the dust settles. That single phrase, waiting for the dust to settle, is the quietest wealth killer in modern history. The dust never settles. In 2011, it was the collapse of European sovereign debt. In 2015, the devaluation of the yuan and the crude oil crash. In 2018, interest rate hikes and trade wars. In 2020, a complete global shutdown. In 2022, generational inflation and war. There has never been a single Tuesday morning in the history of global trade where the world woke up, looked around, and agreed that everything felt safe, predictable, and calm. The stock market is not an open-air farmer's market where goods get marked down because the sun is out and the vendors are in a good mood. The discount exists specifically because people think the roof is caving in. When you wait for the news cycle to turn positive, you aren't waiting for safety, you're simply waiting for the asset to become expensive again. A beginner sits in cash for 3 years, congratulating themselves on avoiding a minor 10% dip. But while they were waiting for the perfect entry, the broader market quietly climbed 70%. Watching that happen does something terrible to human psychology. It triggers shame, and shame makes people reckless. When someone loses 4 or 5 years to pure hesitation, their internal timeline feels fractured. They look at boring, broad market index funds averaging 7 or 8% a year, and their stomach drops. They do the back-of-the-napkin math on their monthly paycheck and realize that at this pace, they won't see meaningful wealth until they're 70 years old. So, they try to cut corners. They convince themselves they don't need a 30-year plan anymore. They just need one incredible 12-month run to catch back up. They stop paying attention to boring, durable companies, businesses that manufacture shipping containers, produce industrial asphalt, or bottle cleaning supplies. They start hunting for stories. They find the early-stage tech company promising to disrupt global logistics with proprietary algorithms, the mining penny stock sitting on an unverified lithium deposit, or the obscure digital asset backed by an army of hyper-confident strangers in online chat rooms. When you buy a piece of an asset based purely on an exciting narrative, you haven't bought into a cash-generating enterprise, you've bought a mood. And moods evaporate the second the wind changes. The asset drops 22% over a long holiday weekend because there are no real earnings, no operational cash flows, and no institutional balance sheets underpinning the price. There is nothing to steady your nerves. All you have is the shrinking balance on your phone screen. The original fear returns, but it's mutated. It's no longer the fear of missing out. It's the raw, sick feeling of watching 3 months of hard labor vanish before your morning commute. You sell. Bitterly, you tell your friends that the market is a rigged casino designed to strip working people of their savings. You close the app, move what's left of your bruised principal back into a zero-interest checking account, and nurse the wound. 2 years pass. The broad indexes slowly grind back upward to new highs. The itch returns. The psychological damage here isn't just the financial loss, it's the erosion of conviction. Each failed cycle reinforces the false belief that building wealth requires luck, perfect timing, or insider access. Then comes the third mistake, and this one is the most heartbreaking because it strikes the people who actually did their homework. These are the disciplined beginners. They didn't freeze on the sidelines, and they didn't chase speculative hype. They bought index funds. They set up automated transfers. They turned off the television news and ignored the panic. They executed the textbook strategy flawlessly. Yet 6 or 7 years later, they find themselves back at zero because they built an investment strategy without building a life jacket. They funneled every single spare dollar of their monthly cash flow directly into the market to maximize compounding efficiency, keeping their actual bank savings down to a bare few $100s. Then reality intervened. A transmission blew out on a dark highway, a child needed an unplanned dental procedure, or a company restructured and eliminated an entire department overnight. When life demands $5,000 in 48 hours, the financial market doesn't care that your portfolio happens to be down 18% that month. It doesn't care that liquidating those shares locks in a permanent loss and triggers an awkward tax bill. You are forced to cannibalize your best compounding assets at the worst possible price, not because your investment thesis was flawed, but because you treated an equity portfolio like an emergency fund. Every time you sell an appreciating asset to cover a predictable life inconvenience, you reset the compounding clock back to zero. You unfold the paper all the way back to the tabletop. Compounding is a ruthless psychological test because its rewards are almost entirely backloaded. In the first 5 to 7 years, practically every single dollar of net worth in your account is money you had to physically earn, budget, and deposit with your own sweat. It feels like pushing a 2-ton boulder through wet sand for almost no visible distance. The breakthrough only happens on the folds almost nobody has the patience to reach. It happens in years 12, 17, and 25, when the interest earned on the interest in a single quarter quietly dwarfs everything you saved during your first 3 years of discipline combined. Most people never get to see that chapter of their lives. Not because they lacked the intelligence, not because they didn't work hard enough at their day jobs. They simply couldn't endure the silence of the beginning. They couldn't sit with the discomfort of putting capital to work when the news looked bleak. They couldn't stomach the boredom of 7% while the world around them cheered on short-term fads. And they failed to protect their long-term assets from everyday short-term emergencies. Building lasting wealth is not an intellectual exercise. It is a game of emotional endurance. The market has never paid people for trying to outsmart the future. It rewards the few who are willing to remain completely still while everyone else is panicking.